9-year-old boy reveals that the woman from Torrenza doesn't know it's 2025. Lucas Morales crouched on the stairway landing, watching through the railings as the woman in the blue hijab collected her mail. There was something different about her, something that had fascinated Lucas since he and his mother had moved into the old San Vito apartment building 3 weeks ago. It wasn't just that she was one of the few residents who still collected physical mail, or that she always checked her mailbox at exactly 3:17 p.m., according to the digital wall clock in the lobby. It was the way she moved, cautiously, as if the world around her was made of thin glass that might shatter at any moment. Today, as she sorted through envelopes with practiced fingers, Lucas noticed her pause at a flyer advertising the neighborhood's upcoming augmented reality festival. Her brow furrowed as she studied the holographic preview square on the paper, tilting it back and forth in the light as if trying to understand some alien technology. "It's AR," Lucas said before he could stop himself, his voice echoing in the marble lobby. The woman startled, nearly dropping her mail. Her eyes, deep brown and lined with years Lucas couldn't count, found him on the staircase. "I'm sorry," Lucas said quickly, descending the remaining steps. "I didn't mean to scare you." "It's all right," she replied, her accent thick, but her English clear. "What did you say this is?" She held up the flyer, her expression genuinely confused. "Augmented reality," Lucas explained, approaching carefully like he might with a nervous cat. You know, when digital stuff gets added on top of what you're really seeing, like Pokemon Go, but way better now." The woman's confusion only deepened. "Pokemon?" Lucas was 9, but he was observant enough to know when someone was truly puzzled versus when adults pretended not to understand kid things. This wasn't pretending. "I'm Lucas," he offered, extending his hand the way his mother had taught him. "Apartment 4B. We just moved in." "Fatima," she replied, taking his hand briefly. "Apartment 4A. We are neighbors, then." Lucas nodded. He knew they were neighbors. He'd heard her moving around through the walls, had smelled the unfamiliar spices when she cooked, had seen the middle-aged man who visited her every Tuesday and Friday at precisely 2 p.m. "Is that your son who visits you?" Lucas asked, curiosity overcoming manners. Something flickered across Fatima's face, a shadow of emotion Lucas couldn't name. "My nephew," she said after a moment. "Karim. He is a doctor." "Cool," Lucas replied. "My mom's a graphic designer. She works from home now, which is why we moved here. Our old apartment was too small for her studio stuff." Fatima nodded politely, clutching her mail to her chest. Lucas noticed she was wearing what looked like a watch, but with actual hands that moved around a face. Not a smart watch or a bio band like most people wore. "Do you want to know what time it is?" he asked, gesturing to his own wrist, where his junior track displayed not just the time, but his heart rate, steps, and a small game reward icon for completing his math homework. "I have the time," Fatima replied, glancing at her anachronistic timepiece. "It is nearly 3:20. "Yeah, but mine syncs automatically with the global time servers," Lucas said. "Sometimes the old ones can be off by a few minutes." Fatima's expression changed subtly. "Global, time servers." Lucas was about to explain when the lobby door slid open with a soft hiss, and a delivery drone hovered in, its propellers creating a gentle breeze. Fatima stepped back quickly, alarm visible on her face. "It's okay," Lucas reassured her. "It's just a delivery drone, probably for Mr. Guzman in 2C. He orders lunch every day." The drone navigated smoothly to the package shelf, deposited a brown bag with "Taste of Shanghai" printed on it, then departed as efficiently as it had arrived. Fatima watched its exit with unconcealed apprehension. "We didn't have those in Torrenza," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Is that where you're from? Torrenza?" Lucas asked. "Where is that?" "It was a small city near the border," she replied vaguely. "It is not there anymore." Before Lucas could ask what she meant, the elevator chimed, and his mother emerged, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, paint smudges on her forearms. "Lucas, there you are. I was wondering where you'd gone." Elena Morales approached with a warm smile, extending her hand to Fatima. "I'm Elena, Lucas's mom. We're in 4B. "Fatima Nazari," the woman replied. "4A. "Mom, Fatima's from Torrenza," Lucas interjected. "And she doesn't know about AR or delivery drones." Elena shot her son a look that clearly communicated his comment was rude. "Lucas, not everyone uses the same technology. I'm sorry, Ms. Nazari." "No offense taken," Fatima said. "Technology changes so quickly these days." "Don't I know it?" Elena agreed. "Just when I master one design program, the whole interface changes." Fatima smiled politely, but said nothing. Lucas watched her carefully, adding another observation to his mental file. Fatima Nazari didn't just seem unfamiliar with technology, she seemed unsettled by its very existence. "That we should let you get back to your day," Elena said, placing a gentle hand on Lucas's shoulder. "It was nice to meet you, Ms. Nazari. Please call me Fatima. Perhaps you would like to come for tea sometime?" Elena's face brightened. "We'd love that." "Thank you." As they rode the elevator to the 4th floor, Lucas couldn't stop thinking about his new neighbor. "Mom, something's weird about Fatima." "Lucas," Elena admonished softly. "That's not a kind thing to say about someone we barely know." "I don't mean bad weird," Lucas clarified. "Just different. Like she's surprised by normal stuff. She's from another country, mijo. Things are different in other places." "Yeah, but she didn't know what a delivery drone was. Everyone knows what those are. They've been around forever." Elena chuckled. "Not forever. I remember when they first started testing them in commercial applications. It was a big deal." "When was that?" "Oh, around 2016 or so. They weren't commonplace until maybe 2019. Lucas fell silent, thinking. The elevator arrived at their floor, and as they walked to their apartment, he glanced at 4A. Unlike the other doors in the building, which had digital nameplates or smart locks, Fatima's door had a simple brass nameplate and what looked like an actual keyed lock. 2 days later, Lucas stood outside apartment 4AA, holding a misdelivered envelope that had been placed in their mailbox by mistake. His mother had told him to drop it through the mail slot, but he found himself knocking instead, curiosity overwhelming him. Fatima opened the door after a long moment, her expression cautious until she recognized him. "Lucas, hello." "You got our mail," he said, holding out the envelope. "Bye." "Oh, thank you." She took it, glancing at the address. "Would you like to come in for a moment? I just made some mint tea." Lucas nodded eagerly, stepping into Fatima's apartment with the exploratory enthusiasm of a young anthropologist discovering a new culture. The interior was unexpectedly warm and colorful, with richly patterned rugs covering the floor and fabric hangings on the walls. But what struck Lucas immediately was what was missing. There was no wall screen, no smart home hub, no charging stations or digital photo frames. The apartment looked like something from an old movie. "Your place is cool," he said, following her to a small kitchen where a traditional kettle, not an Insta-boiler, sat on a stovetop. "Thank you," Fatima replied, pouring amber liquid into a small glass with a gold rim. "It reminds me of home." Lucas accepted the tea, which smelled sweet and herbal. As he sipped, he wandered to the living room window, where a paper calendar hung on the wall. "Your calendar's wrong," he said, pointing to the open page that clearly displayed March 2013. Fatima froze, teapot still in hand. "What do you mean?" "It says 2013. It's 2025. The teapot slipped from Fatima's fingers, shattering on the floor, hot liquid splashing across the tile. But more shocking than the broken ceramic was the look of absolute disbelief and horror that crossed her face. "What did you say?" she whispered. "It's 2025, Lucas repeated, suddenly uncertain. "March 18th, 2025. Fatima's hand went to her throat. "No," she said, shaking her head. "No, you are confused. It is 2013. Lucas pulled out his junior track, holding it up to show her the date displayed clearly on its screen. "See? 2025. Fatima stared at the device, then at Lucas, her eyes wide with something that looked unsettlingly like fear. "I think you should go now," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But your tea, the mess." "Please," she insisted, already moving toward the door. "Thank you for returning the mail." Confused and a little frightened by her reaction, Lucas hurried out. As the door closed behind him, he heard what sounded like a strangled sob from within. That evening at dinner, Lucas couldn't stop thinking about Fatima's reaction. "Mom," he said finally, "I think something's really wrong with our neighbor." Elena looked up from her pasta, concern crossing her features. "What do you mean, mijo?" Lucas pushed his broccoli around his plate, trying to articulate what had unsettled him. "Fatima thinks it's 2013. She has a calendar from 2013 on her wall. And when I told her it's actually 2025, she got really upset. Like, really upset." Elena's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Are you sure you didn't misunderstand?" "No, Mom. She literally said, 'It is 2013, and then freaked out when I showed her the date on my junior track." Lucas leaned forward, lowering his voice as if Fatima might hear through the walls. "And her apartment is weird. No wall screens, no smart anything. Just old stuff, like in those period movies you like." Elena set her fork down, her expression thoughtful. "Some people prefer simpler living, Lucas. Not everyone embraces all this technology." "It's not just that," Lucas insisted. "She didn't know what a delivery drone was, or AR, and she wears an actual watch with hands that move around." He mimicked the circular motion with his finger. "Who does that?" "Plenty of people wear analog watches, honey. They're considered classic." "Mom, you're not listening." Lucas's frustration was mounting. Something's wrong with her. Like, maybe she has that thing. What did Abuela have? Where she forgot stuff? Elena's face softened. "Dementia? That's a possibility. How old would you say Miss Nazari is?" Lucas considered. "Not as old as Abuela was. Maybe like 50. But she could still have memory problems, right?" "It's possible," Elena conceded. "But Lucas, we can't just assume something is wrong with her. That could be very hurtful." "So what do we do?" Elena thought for a moment. "You mentioned a nephew who visits her, a doctor." "Yeah, on Tuesdays and Fridays at exactly 2 o'clock. Elena smiled at her son's precise observation. "Today's Thursday, so tomorrow he should visit. Maybe I'll try to introduce myself, see if there's anything we can do to help." Lucas nodded, but something still bothered him. "Mom, When she said Torrenza isn't there anymore, what did that mean? A shadow crossed Elena's face. I'm not sure, she said carefully. I'll look it up after dinner. Later that night, after Lucas had gone to bed, Elena sat at her design station, her current project forgotten as she searched for information about Torrenza. What she found made her stomach tighten. News articles from 2013 about a small city near a disputed border that had been virtually destroyed in a series of attacks. Hundreds killed, thousands displaced. The accompanying images showed devastation, buildings reduced to rubble, civilians fleeing with whatever they could carry. One article included a photo of survivors in a refugee camp. Elena zoomed in on a group of women in hijabs. Though younger, thinner, and clearly traumatized, one face was unmistakable: Fatima Nazari. The next day, Lucas raced home from school, eager to see if his mother had learned anything about their mysterious neighbor. He found Elena in her studio, her expression troubled. "Did you talk to the doctor guy?" he asked, dropping his backpack by the door. Elena shook her head. "I waited in the lobby for nearly an hour, but he must have come earlier than usual." "Or used the back entrance," Lucas suggested. "Sometimes delivery people use it when the drones are too big for the front door." "Maybe," Elena agreed. "Lucas, I did some research about Torrenza last night." "And?" "It was a city in a region that experienced terrible violence in 2013. Many people died, and the survivors became refugees." Lucas's eyes widened. "Oh? Was Fatima one of them?" "I think so. I found a picture that looks like her, from a refugee camp." Lucas sat heavily on his mother's ergonomic stool, trying to process this information. "So, maybe that's why she thinks it's still 2013? Because something really bad happened then?" "It's possible," Elena said gently. Sometimes when people experience severe trauma, it affects their memory and perception." Lucas was quiet for a moment. "We should help her," he finally declared. "Lucas, this isn't like finding a stray cat. Ms. Nazari is an adult who may have complex medical needs. If she's under a doctor's care, which it sounds like she is, the best thing we can do is be kind neighbors and not interfere." "But, no buts. Promise me you won't pester her about what year it is, or anything that might upset her." Lucas reluctantly agreed, but the mystery of Fatima Nazari had firmly taken root in his mind. Over the next week, Lucas observed Fatima's apartment from various vantage points in the building. He noted that her groceries were delivered by a man in a van, not the typical auto-grocer service that most residents used. The same man also brought what appeared to be newspapers and magazines. Once, when the door opened as the man was leaving, Lucas glimpsed what looked like the front page of a newspaper with a 2013 date. On Tuesday afternoon, Lucas positioned himself in the building's small library, which offered a clear view of Fatima's door. At precisely 2 p.m., a well-dressed man in his 40s arrived, carrying a leather medical bag. Lucas recognized him from previous visits, Fatima's nephew, the doctor. When the man emerged an hour later, Lucas was waiting by the elevator, pretending to be deeply engaged with his junior track. "Excuse me," the man said politely as Lucas blocked his path. "Sorry," Lucas replied, looking up with practiced innocence. "Are you Dr. Nazari, Fatima's nephew?" The man's expression shifted subtly, a wariness entering his eyes. "Yes, I am. And you are?" "Lucas Morales. My mom and I live next door in 4B. I was at your aunt's apartment last week, and I think I upset her. I wanted to apologize." Dr. Nazari studied him carefully. "What exactly happened?" Lucas hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. I told her it's 2025, not 2013. She got really scared. The doctor's professional composure slipped for just a moment, revealing alarm and something that looked like exhaustion. He glanced around to ensure they were alone in the hallway. "Lucas, isn't it? Would you mind sitting with me for a moment?" He gestured to a bench near the elevator. Once seated, Dr. Nazari chose his words carefully. "My aunt has a very rare condition. Her mind, it's become fixed at a specific point in time. Do you understand what I mean?" Lucas nodded slowly. "She thinks it's still 2013. Yes, and for her well-being, it's important that this belief isn't challenged too directly. It can cause her significant distress." "Is it because of what happened in Torrenza?" Lucas asked. Dr. Nazari's eyebrows rose slightly. "You know about Torrenza? My mom found articles about it. There was a war or something, right? And Fatima was there." The doctor sighed deeply. "It wasn't officially a war, but yes, Fatima lost her husband, her children, and her home on March 14, 2013. The trauma was catastrophic." "So she has PTSD?" Lucas asked, using a term he'd learned from a documentary. "It's more complex than that. Her mind has essentially rejected everything after that date. To protect herself from the unbearable reality of her losses, she experiences time as if it stopped in 2013, just before the attacks." Lucas frowned, processing this. "So you make everything in her apartment look like it's still 2013? "Yes, it's an unusual treatment approach. But for Fatima, traditional therapies were ineffective. This controlled environment allows her to function. The alternative would be complete psychological breakdown." "Does she ever go outside?" Lucas asked, thinking of the complex technological landscape that would immediately shatter the illusion. "Rarely, and only to specific locations with my supervision. Places without obvious modern technology." Dr. Nazari leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Lucas, I need your help. Can you keep this conversation between us and avoid discussing the current year or modern technology with my aunt?" Lucas nodded solemnly. "I promise. But will she ever get better? Will she ever know it's really 2025? Dr. Nazari's face revealed the burden of a question he had likely asked himself countless times. "I don't know. For now, this fragile peace of mind is the best we can offer her." As Dr. Nazari rose to leave, Lucas had one more question. "The man who brings her groceries and newspapers, they're all from 2013, aren't they?" The doctor's expression registered surprise at Lucas's perceptiveness. "Yes. We reprint news from that time. Everything in her apartment, the magazines, the books, everything, is carefully curated to maintain the illusion." "That sounds really hard," Lucas observed. "It is," Dr. Nazari agreed, "but she's my only remaining family. After what happened in Torrenza." He trailed off, then squared his shoulders. "Sidit, thank you for your understanding, Lucas. It's rare to find someone so young with such empathy." After Dr. Nazari departed, Lucas remained on the bench, his mind racing with this new information. Despite his promise not to interfere, he couldn't stop thinking about Fatima, trapped in 2013 like a character in a time-travel story. Except she wasn't traveling. She was frozen, while the world moved forward without her. For the next 2 weeks, Lucas kept his promise. When he occasionally encountered Fatima collecting her mail or in the hallway, he was careful to avoid any mention of the year or technology. Instead, he asked her about the spices he could smell from her cooking, or the intricate patterns on the scarf she sometimes wore over her hijab. These brief interactions sparked a tentative friendship. Lucas discovered that Fatima had once been a literature professor, specializing in folklore and mythology. Her eyes lit up when he mentioned his love for adventure stories, and she began recommending books, all published before 2013, he noted. "Stories are bridges between worlds," she told him one afternoon, as they sat on the bench in the building's small courtyard. "They let us experience lives we cannot live ourselves." Lucas pondered her words, wondering if stories might be bridges across time as well as space, a way to connect Fatima's 2013 to the real 2025. His opportunity came unexpectedly. One morning, residents found notices in the lobby announcing mandatory building renovations starting in 3 months. The entire electrical system would be upgraded. Walls would be opened for new smart home wiring, and all apartments would receive modern fixtures. "They can't do that to Fatima's apartment," Lucas told his mother anxiously. "It would ruin everything Dr. Nazari has set up." Elena looked troubled. "You're right. It would be impossible to maintain the illusion with construction workers installing new technology. I should speak with Dr. Nazari about this." But Lucas was already formulating his own plan. That evening, he knocked on Fatima's door with a book in hand, one she had recommended about a boy who discovers a portal to another world. "I finished it," he announced, when she invited him in. It was amazing, the way he had to learn the rules of the other world to survive. Fatima smiled, gesturing for him to sit in her living room. "Yes, that's what I've always loved about portal stories. The protagonist must adapt to an entirely new reality." "I was thinking about writing my own portal story," Lucas said carefully. "Maybe you could help me, since you know so much about literature and stuff." "I would be honored," Fatima replied, genuine pleasure lighting her features. "What kind of world are you imagining?" "Well," Lucas began, choosing his words with deliberate care, "I was thinking about a boy who finds a doorway to the future. Like, what if he went from 2013 to 2025? What would be different?" He watched her closely, but instead of distress, Fatima's expression showed only academic interest. An intriguing premise, speculative fiction rather than fantasy. "What do you imagine 2025 would be like?" Lucas felt a surge of excitement. Within the safe frame of fiction, he could tell Fatima about the real world outside her apartment. "I think there would be delivery drones bringing packages and food, and augmented reality that lets you see digital things overlaid on the real world. Everyone would have screens built into their walls instead of TVs, and cars that drive themselves." To his relief, Fatima engaged enthusiastically with his speculations, asking questions and offering suggestions. "Your future sounds very convenient, if perhaps a bit too dependent on technology." "Nadrefior," she observed. "Sritridil fi quite fan. Coos. What about the human elements? What would be different socially or politically?" Over the next several visits, Lucas expanded his story, carefully introducing elements of the real 2025 while gauging Fatima's reactions. When Dr. Nazari learned of their collaborative storytelling, his initial alarm gave way to cautious optimism. "This is remarkable," he told Elena after observing one of Lucas and Fatima's sessions. "She's engaging with the concept of a post-2013 world without dissociating. The fictional framework seems to create a psychological buffer." "Lucas has always had a gift for connecting with people," Elena said proudly. But what about the renovations? They start in 6 weeks now." Dr. Nazari's expression grew serious. "I've been exploring options. Moving her would be traumatic, but staying might be impossible once construction begins. Unless," Lucas interjected from the kitchen doorway, where he'd been not so subtly eavesdropping. Fatima was ready to know about 2025 by then. The adults exchanged glances. "Lucas, it's not that simple," Dr. Nazari began. But what if it could be?" Lucas persisted. "Our story is helping. She talks about 2025 now, even if she thinks it's fiction. And yesterday, she asked me questions about my junior track without getting upset. Over the following weeks, with Dr. Nazari's careful guidance and the assistance of a specialist in traumatic dissociation, Lucas's storytelling sessions evolved into a form of improvisational therapy. The line between fiction and reality gradually blurred, with Fatima herself adding elements to their collaborative tale, unconsciously processing the technological and social changes she had refused to acknowledge for 12 years. "In your story," she said one rainy afternoon, "would there be peace in the region around Torrenza? Would the people who lost their homes ever return?" It was the first time she had directly connected their fictional future to her past. Lucas glanced uncertainly at Dr. Nazari, who nodded almost imperceptibly from his position by the window. "Some places were rebuilt," Lucas said gently. "Not exactly the same as before, but people made new homes, and there's been a peace agreement for 7 years now." Fatima was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the pattern on her teacup. "That would be good," she finally whispered. "In your story, that would be very good." The breakthrough came 3 days before construction was scheduled to begin. Lucas arrived at Fatima's apartment with a newspaper, a real one, from 2025, that Dr. Nazari had reluctantly agreed to include in their session. "I brought something for our story research," Lucas said, placing it on the coffee table. "It's a prop I made, what a newspaper might look like in 2025. Fatima picked it up curiously. The headline announced a peace conference anniversary in the region where Torrenza had once stood. There was a photo of new construction, green parks replacing what had once been rubble. "This is very creative, Lucas," she said, but her hands trembled slightly. "It looks so real." "Fatima," Lucas said, using her name directly, something he rarely did. "What if it is real? What if our story isn't just a story?" Her eyes met his, fear battling with something else, a fragile, tentative recognition. "What do you mean?" "What if it really is 2025 now? What if 12 years have passed since what happened in Torrenza?" Dr. Nazari, who had been silently observing from the doorway, stepped forward, ready to intervene if Fatima showed signs of distress. But she remained still, her eyes fixed on the newspaper, on the date printed at the top. "I know," she said finally, so softly they almost missed it. I think I've known for some time now." The room fell silent. Dr. Nazari knelt beside her chair. "You know what year it is?" Fatima nodded slowly. "Not always. Not consistently. But when Lucas talks about his future world, part of me recognizes it as real." She looked up, tears shimmering in her eyes. "It was easier to stay in 2013, before I lost everyone, before Torrenza was destroyed." "I know," Dr. Nazari said gently, taking her hand. "You weren't ready before." "And now?" Lucas asked, hardly daring to hope. Fatima took a deep breath. "Now, perhaps it's time to build a bridge, as Lucas would say, a bridge from then to now." She looked around her apartment, her carefully maintained time capsule. "It cannot stay 2013 forever." The day the renovation crews arrived, Fatima stood in the hallway, watching as workers carried modern fixtures and tools into the building. Dr. Nazari remained close, monitoring her reactions, But the expected distress didn't materialize. Instead, she observed with quiet curiosity, occasionally asking Lucas to explain an unfamiliar piece of technology. "Are you sad about your apartment changing?" Lucas asked as they watched a smart home technician unload equipment. Fatima considered the question thoughtfully. "Yes," she admitted, "but also ready. The world continued without me. Lucas, perhaps it's time I rejoin it." 1 month later, as summer heat gave way to early autumn breezes, the residents of the building gathered in the renovated courtyard for a celebration marking the completion of the upgrades. Fatima attended, wearing a new hijab with an intricate pattern that matched her eyes. Though she still struggled occasionally with the date, needing gentle reminders that it was indeed 2025, she moved through the gathering with growing confidence. Lucas found her admiring the courtyard's new interactive mural, which changed scenes with the time of day. "Do you like it?" he asked, joining her. "It's beautiful," she replied, "like something from one of our stories." Lucas grinned. "Except it's real." Fatima nodded, her expression serene despite the tears that briefly shimmered in her eyes. "Yes, real." She looked down at him, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "Thank you, Lucas, for the bridge you built." "What will you do now?" he asked, "now that you're in 2025 for real?" Fatima glanced around at the gathering, at Elena chatting with neighbors, at Dr. Nazari watching them from across the courtyard, at the blend of old and new that characterized their renovated building. I think," she said slowly, "I might like to teach again. Perhaps children your age. They seem to make excellent guides to new worlds." As twilight descended and the interactive mural shifted to a starry night scene, Lucas stood beside Fatima, both of them gazing upward at the digital constellations. Different worlds, different times, connected by a child's understanding that sometimes the gentlest way forward is through stories. Bridges spanning the chasms that life creates, leading toward healing one careful step at a time.